Howdy, folks. Welcome into the Old Time Banjo Festival workshop with Evie Ladin today, coming to us from California. And I'm Brad Kolodner here putting this together with Kathy Fink. Kathy, can you hear me?
I can. You sound great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, this has been a ton of fun so far today. I know a number of you have been joining us all afternoon with Chris Cool and Adam Hurt. Those workshops were great, and I've been sitting here with my banjo, stealing all their licks, and really looking forward to this one with Evie. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time this weekend, just want to go over a couple of little details about how this is all going to work. But before we do that, I would like to just point out that there are about 60 of us in here. I encourage you to just select gallery view for a moment just to see all these faces that are all here with their banjos. Everybody wave hello to one another and wave hi to Evie there. Yeah, that's great. So fun. Um, so we're all now going to go around and introduce ourselves one by one for the next 15 hours, and we'll get to the banjo workshop. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. It'd be way too hard. We are very happy, though, that we're able to still have our banjos in our hands and play music. And Kathy, would you like to welcome everybody here?
Yeah. Hey, it's great to see everybody. It is pretty awesome that even though this is a substitute for being live in person, we can still connect and bring the community together. And it's really been, I think, way beyond what Brad and I dreamed already. And after Evie's workshop, we're going to take a little break, and then there's the concert tonight. You've all got the YouTube link, so that's really exciting. In terms of the Brad, do you want to talk about how we're going to proceed in terms of chat
Yeah, yeah.
comments?
So we'll get started with the workshop in a moment, but just want to go over a couple of just explain how this is going to work. You're all muted, and you will remain muted during the workshop.
Brad is omnipotent here.
Yes, I have the power. I have the power over you too, Kathy. Here, so you know. So anyway,
Yeah,
we
don't
will.
misuse it, dude.
Yeah. So you all are muted, but you can communicate through the chat box. And you'll see on the bottom where it says chat, you can enter in a question. We'd like to really just keep the chat just to questions for Evie. It'd be great at the end for all of us to uh, thank Evie. You're welcome to write any comments there at the end, but we'd like to keep it mostly just to questions so that we can funnel those towards Evie. And Kathy and I might jump in at various times. Um, Kathy, you want to say a word about how we're recording this and just sort of the general guidelines for that?
Yeah, so folks, this is all being recorded and we've got your emails. And so you'll get a link to the recording. So don't worry about trying to take notes or any of that kind of stuff. If you get somehow kicked out of the meeting or you accidentally leave the meeting, you can rejoin the Zoom meeting. But if for some reason technically that doesn't work for you, then Brad just cut and pasted the YouTube link for where this workshop's going out, and you might want to put it somewhere else on a browser or something so that if you get somehow out of this meeting and can't rejoin, you can rejoin on YouTube.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Evie, I think yeah, we can turn things over to you, and we'll jump in when needed. But otherwise, it's all you, Evie. How's it going out there?
Great. I mean, as good as can be expected. Nice to see some familiar and lots of unfamiliar faces. I'm so glad. Thanks so much to Brad and Kathy for inviting me to do this. This has been really wonderful. I teach regularly at the Freight and Salvage in Berkeley, and we had one live class of a 6 week session before we moved online. So I've been working pretty much since the middle of March in this fashion. And it's both wonderful and very sad. So it's wonderful to feel like we're spending time together, but in the end, of course, I'm in a relatively quiet room. Um, and we're not getting the energy of playing with one another. The other thing is that a lot of my workshops and classes, I really emphasize the opportunity to really play in time, and that's something that I like doing with a group. I feel like that's what's great about group lessons, is that you really, at your own level, at any entry place, you can play along with the tunes and get that experience of playing in time. Because of course, playing in time in a more circular fashion than a more linear fashion is a more traditional way of learning. And I like to employ that as much as possible. In Western civilization, we tend to have a very linear way of learning. We feel like we need to know what we're doing before we do it. Whereas in traditional ways of learning, you're hearing it and doing and hearing and doing and hearing and doing until you're just inside of it. And getting inside of it is, of course, what we're all after. Um, that said, this particular workshop is not that, because I offered, instead of just teaching a tune or something like that, um, I offered to teach a workshop on moving chords all around the neck. And so it's a little more heady, and there are a lot of ways of understanding it. And so I do want to get your fingers on the instrument as much as possible. And I'm sure, because it's such a big group, everyone's going to be coming from a different path of understanding. So I came to playing banjo and to music through a much more traditional way, and so I understand that there are a lot of different ways of understanding how to approach the instrument. And I will say, since especially in old time banjo, since people have started going to college for folk music, more and more old time banjo players are playing chords up the neck. Now, traditionally, this instrument, with its open back and largely open tunings, is often built for having that more open sound. You're not necessarily playing with picks on your fingers, you're playing with your fingernail. You have these open tunings and these really cool different tunings. And so it really has this like open vibe with the, whether the dissonances or the overtones that you get, that oftentimes are dampened from having closed chords. Of course, if you also play three finger style or play bluegrass style, it's all mostly closed chords. But what I'd like to do is go through methodically. Now it's just an hour and change workshop, and so you might reach a certain level of understanding and fall off, or, and apologies for those of you that I'm covering things you already know, but you're here in this workshop. So the idea is, with any workshop, that you get one or two really salient things that you can apply right away. And then the end of that is that in teaching closed chords and teaching the chords that move up and down the neck, instead of having this like put your fingers here, put your fingers there idea, that you understand more of the banjo neck and how it's oriented, and then how you can apply that to your clawhammer playing. All right. So feel free to ask questions as we go, but also feel free to ask me questions afterwards if you have certain sticking points. So I learned, when I first learned, all of my, the chords I learned were here in this, what we call first position, right? You have your open G chord, your C chord in first position, and your, what I was always taught as a D chord, which is of course a D7 chord, and that's in first position, right? So you can get a lot of mileage out of that. And I want to start off with just broaching the idea of 1, 4, 5, of talking in numbers instead of letters. And if that is something that you don't totally understand, we can talk about that later at another time. But the idea being that if G is your 1 chord, G, A, B, C is your 4 chord, and D is your 5 chord. So we're going to mostly be talking about 1, 4, and 5. Just because you can play a gazillion songs just by that. And then also by understanding how the 1, 4, and 5 chord move around, you can also extrapolate and find all the other chords that you might need. Although I don't know why you need any other chords. I'm joking. All right. So actually, well, let's start with this G chord. So if we have an open G chord, right? And if you want to just take a moment and look at the arrangement of notes. So you know in G that our fifth string is of course in the high octave G, and then we have D, G, B, D. Now because this is an open chord, if you think about it, these top 3 strings, G, B, D, You're going 1, 3, 5. Sing along with that. 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. All right, so same thing with the chords. As you walk up and down the scale notes all have a number, and it's based off of your 1, which is G, right? So G, A, B, C, D. I'll just stop right there for now. And when you build a major chord, you're building it off the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. G, B, D. 1, 3, 5. So sing that with me. 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. Or you can sing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or do, re, mi, fa, so. Or G, A, B, C, D. All right, so this is something that I cover a lot in beginner classes, is really singing and understanding that. But what I do want you to notice is that 1 is your middle note, right? The third note of the scale is on your second string, and the fifth note of the scale is on your first string. 1, 3, 5. Now, if you're thinking of your G chord, I kind of think of this as a bar chord, right? Because it's open. So if I was going to go to my 2 chord, I know I said I was mostly talking in 1, 4, 5, but we're going to explore a little bit farther here just for a moment. So if you were to do a 2 major chord at your second fret, so you play any ragtime or swing tunes, you want to play a 2 major chord, and I'm moving my other fingers out of the way just so you can see it a little bit better. Let me know if I need to get closer to the screen, to the camera. So on the second fret is your 2 chord. Now these are just straight up major chords, okay? And then so 4th fret is going to be a 3 major chord. And then if you go to your 5th fret, that's a C major chord. So there's your 4 chord. All right, so you have your 1 chord, 4 chord. Now, if we think of this C chord as sort of our regular old C chord, this bar chord is our next inversion. Okay, it rearranges the order of the notes, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, but it stands to reason that if this bar chord is your C chord, then what's your, where is your C note? Where's your root note in this chord? You can hold up fingers. What string is it on? Yeah. Actually, it's on your 3rd string. Some people are saying 4. It's a 4 chord, but you've moved your root note. So here's your G note in the middle, right? So if you walk up the scale just on that middle G note, G, A, B, C, and we've already determined that the 3rd string in this arrangement, in this bar chord open, is your root note, right? 1, 3, 5. So if you move that anywhere, if you move that bar chord anywhere, the arrangement's going to be 1, 3, 5, C. What's our 3rd note of in the C? E, G. And just to reconnect you with what you might already know, that high G on the 1st string 5th fret is of course the same as your 5th string. Okay? So bar chord, that's our first shape that we're going to move around. So here's our C chord at the 5th fret, and it stands to reason, now this is always true, anytime you have a 4 chord and you move it up 2 frets, there's your 5 chord. The 5 chord and the 4 chord are always 2 frets away from each other, right? So 4 chord, 5 chord on the 7th fret, and then I'm going to skip up to our 12th fret, which I call the new nut. All right? 12th fret is our new nut. And if you can envision like the next 5 frets up from your 12th fret and start to see them as a copy of what exists down here. All right? So we'll talk about fingerings a little later. But for instance, if this is my new nut, now I have to say, when I do my bar chord, I don't usually fret all the way across the strings because my finger is small and I don't want to. I Also, very rarely, this is me, I don't usually play the low notes when I go up the neck. And so just fretting the high strings is what I'm focusing on the most. But in this workshop, what I want to focus on is paying attention to kind of where you are on the neck so that you can use these notes in other ways. All right. So here's our first shape. Open is your G. Go to your 4 chord, 5 chord, and up to your next one is going to be at the 12th fret. All right. So G, C, D, G. All right. So if we play something like, if we play in first position and we go, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Here comes a C chord. You make me happy when skies are gray. Back to G. Here comes a C. You never know, dear, how much I love you. And here's your D7, sunshine away. Now if you move this around, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Playing bar chords. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take, here's your D chord, sunshine away. Now, would I play it like that? Probably not. But just the idea of being able to move that bar chord around, eyeball where your 4 chord is, your 5 chord, and back to your 1. And as I said, if you're also using the new nut, and you're visualizing the 5 frets above the nut, so there's your next 4 chord, and if you've got it, 5 chord, and a 1 chord all the way up there. All right? So that's the bar chord shape. Now, I know I said we were mostly going to talk about 1, 4, 5, and yet here comes our fun flat 7 chord if you know how to make an F chord in root position. So just if you make your D7 chord, and then you're going to add your ring finger and pinky, ring finger on the 4th string 3rd fret, pinky on the 1st string 3rd fret. That's your F chord. But I want you to also notice in the top 3 strings, just the arrangement of your fingers. Top 3 strings and even the top 2 strings. See, they're 2 frets apart. Slide that up 1 fret and 1 more. So you've gone F, F sharp, G. And now you're all Jimi Hendrix. The wind's crying merry. All right? But if you notice, okay, so we're going to call this F shape. This is the next inversion of your G chord. Now here's my question. Where is your root note? Where are your G notes in that shape? You've ended on the shape is now between the 3rd and the 5th frets. Hold up your fingers for where are you going to find your G notes? Yes, it's on the 4th string and the 1st string. Because as you see, as we saw when we did our C chord and we were like C, E, G, connecting with that G note on your 5th fret with your open 5th string, right? That's a G note. And because we know open, the 4th string and the 1st string are both Ds. So at the 5th fret, they're both going to be Gs, right? So what an inversion is, as you move up the neck, is that you're rearranging the order of the notes. So instead of 1, 3, 5, as we did 1, 3, 5, now we have 1, 3, 5, 1. Okay, so think about that for a minute. 1, 3, 5, 1. So anywhere you make this shape, you want to realize that your root note is on your fourth and your first strings. Your third is on the third string there. And your fifth, the fifth note to make that chord, major chord, is on the second string. All right? Now, when we moved our bar chord around, we moved from, let's say, the nut up to the fifth fret, and that was the distance to our 4 chord. G, C, moved up 5 frets. So anytime you're moving from your 1 chord to your 4 chord, you're going to move 5 frets. So if you move up 5 frets from that G chord there, here's your 4 chord. It is ending on the 10th fret. Here's your 4 chord. So that would be C, E, G, C. And then stands to reason you move up 2 more frets. Is your 5 chord. So it'd be D, F sharp, A, D. That order of notes. And then, of course, up to past your new nut. Ending 5 frets past on the 17th fret, 5 frets past your new nut. And relating this G chord up here to this one. Move back and forth a few times. Now go to your F-shaped C chord. D chord. And up to G again. So from this shape, excuse me, we're just going to move the F shape around. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. I'm going to say this too. If you have a hard time using all 4 fingers, maybe just use the top three strings and only play those strings. Or you can even just use the top 2 strings and only play those strings. I'm going to make the whole chord though so you can see it. And we're going to move this around with the song. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Moving up to your C chord. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. If this is brand new to you, obviously it takes a minute to get your fingers oriented. But the main thing I want you to hold on to is that in the same shape, the 4 chord is going to be 5 frets up, and the 5 chord is going to be 2 frets from there, 7 frets up. And that's always true. And on any instrument, too, that is true. All right? Because that's how many half steps there are to get to that, to get to where you need to go. So far, so good? All right. Shape number 3 is actually our D major shape. I joke that, people ask, why do we often play this D7 as our standard, what we call D in old time music? It has that nice 7 note. It has that little dissonant feel to it. So here's our D major chord. It's just too happy for old time music, but we still use it. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll just talk you through it. Just like in the F shape, you went 2, 3, 4, walking up, 2, 3, 4. In the D shape, you go 3, 2, 1, the first few strings, starting at the 2nd fret, and use your pinky down there. I don't know if anyone needs more clarification on this. This is a chord shape that I did not learn for a long time. Um, I guess you can ask if you need more clarification on how to make that. But just as you did, so we're between the second and fourth frets, playing this D major shape. And just as you did with the F shape, I want you to notice where your fingers are. For instance, in shorthand, I'm looking at this like when I'm playing this up the neck, instead of using all four fingers with the pinky and ring finger on the first and fourth strings, I very often just use my ring finger on the first string. Excuse me. And just playing the top three strings. So you're going 3, 2, 1. The strings in that order. Okay? Excuse me. All right. Now, this is our D chord. So we're already at our 5 chord. Now, what I want you to do when you're making this D chord right here, slide it back up the neck to your 4 chord, to your C chord. Now, we're used to fingering it a little differently in first position, but I want you to notice how those top 2 strings slide from C to D. Yeah. Or you can do the whole chord. Now, if we're going to do the same thing we did before, you're making that D shape between the second and fourth strings. And if you move that shape up between 7 and 9, you've gotten to your G chord, to your 1 chord. Excuse me, I have a tickle. So do that for a minute, going from D to G. And so the distance from the 5 chord to the 1 chord is also 5 frets. Because
Evie,
know,
somebody wants you to repeat that C shape, please.
So the C shape being your regular C shape in first position?
Yeah, and how you backed it up from the D chord and
Gotcha.
showed that it's connected.
So if you make the D shape, D shape, again, it's first finger on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, second finger on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, and for right now, let's put our pinky on the 1st string, 4th fret, and your ring finger on the 4th string, 4th fret. And if you take that shape and you slide it back to the nut, your first finger now has nowhere to go. But if you see, it's the same shape as your original C shape. And that's your 4 chord. You move it up 2 frets. You need to fret that 3rd string so it goes with you as you move the chords around. Cool. Now, this might be, this is sort of a tricky thing about music theory if you're not that familiar with music theory. But there are 7 notes in our major scale, right? So we've already determined when we go from G to C, you go up 5 frets to get to your 4 chord, okay? Because you have 2 whole steps and a half step. And I'm not going to go deep into this, but 2 whole steps and a half step equals 5. 2 plus 2 plus 1, right? So that's 5 frets up. And then we talked about our 5 chords. So we have our 4 chord and our 5 chord. Now, the interesting thing here, if you go from 5 up to 1, 5, 6, 7, 1, you're moving a 4th. So if you do any singing or things like that, and people say a 5th above or a 4th below, it's because you're working with 7. And so it's going to be uneven as you cycle back around to 8. All right, think about that. D, E, F sharp, G is only where you're moving up a 4th. All right, so by that logic, you're also moving 5 frets to get from your 5 chord up to your 1 chord. And then to get to your next 4 chord, you're moving another 5 frets. And what I want you to notice about this 4 chord up here is notice that your first finger is on the new nut at the 12th fret, and your other 3 fingers look exactly like your C chord back here. Yeah? So up here, you're making this same shape up from 13, 14, 15 frets up above your new nut. And really, I think about that new nut a lot, because this is as if you have your nut here, and it all repeats again. And so by that logic here, you have your 4 chord up here, slide up 2 frets, 5 chord, you're just repeating this 5 chord here. And then if you have it, I can't even, my frets are too tiny for my meaty fingers here I never play all the way up there. And I have to say, part of the reason why I don't play all the way up there is the way my banjo is set up. I have higher action because I play over here on the neck, and I know that's a reason why a lot of people have scoops, is so that you can keep lower action throughout most of the neck and still have the high action to play claw hammer against over the neck, which has a really nice tone. So I don't know if you're following me on that. Some of you know this, but anyway, I like to play over here. I haven't scooped out this neck, and so it's really high action for me, really far up the neck. So I very often will just take it to like the 17th fret is about how high I normally will experiment with on my banjo, on this particular banjo. So now we have our 3 shapes. Let's play our song, You Are My Sunshine, with our D shape. So if we're starting on our 1 chord, we're in that D shape between the 7th and 9th frets. And then if all 4 fingers is too hard, you can use just your 3 fingers, going 3, 2, 1. And actually, before we go any further, I would like to look at the arrangement of the notes in this shape, in this inversion. So where's your root note? When you're up here, where is your G? Hold up your fingers for which string it's on. Right, you're on your 2nd string is your G note. So now we've rearranged the notes. If you're going from, if you just look at if you look at 3, 2, 1 of your strings, 3rd string, 2nd string, 1st string, it's 5, 1, 3. So now anytime you're in this shape, your 2nd string is going to be the root note of the chord. And even if you just look at the top 2 notes, 1, 3, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3. So you see how each inversion rearranges the order of these notes. All right, I'm going to go back to just using all 4 fingers, and we're going to play through You Are My Sunshine. Just moving this shape around, so we're going to be moving it a lot. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Up to your C chord, you make me happy when skies are gray. We go down, you'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take back to original D, my sunshine away. Now that's just moving that shape around, 1, 4, 5. And if your fingers aren't really catching on to that shape yet, you know, that takes a minute. And partly because I did start off using just this 2-finger D chord, it took me a while to wrap my fingers around this 4-finger D chord, but then notice that you are playing just sort of where your fingers are in relation to that. Okay? Now the next thing I want to do is to use these 3 shapes and cycle through them just for each chord, meaning that here's my G chord, open, right? So you could call that a bar chord. My next G shape, my next G, sorry, not G shape, my next G chord is the F shape, the next inversion, so it's between the 3rd and 5th frets. And the next G chord, and the next G chord, and the next one. So take a minute and notice that you're going, if you count open as bar chord, you're going bar chord, F shape, D shape, bar chord, F shape, and then if you can go up higher than that comfortably, the next one would be a D shape. And then make sure you go back down, because a lot of times we practice things going up the neck, but not necessarily going down the neck. And for some reason, we get more lost when we're going in reverse. So you have your G chord up here on your F shape, then down to your bar chord, then down to your D shape, and down to your F shape, and open again. So those are all your 1 chords, right? So now let's look at your 4 chords. So play it in first position. We've seen that that's really a D shape slid back with your fingers in a different order. Okay, so C chord, D shape, the next one's going to be bar chord, the next one, F shape, and the next one, D shape again, but noticing the new nut and the shape of that C chord up here in the neck. And the next one, bar chord, and I'm going to go back down. Bar chord, D shape, F shape, bar chord, D shape. Yeah, so you see how you're cycling through the different shapes as you move around. And it's also, not to get too much into this, but we did look at the placement, which notes is the root, the 5th, and the 3rd. And just, I've had a lot of students over the years, because so many people learn by rote. Just put your fingers here, put your fingers here, not really sort of understanding the system, as it were. Obviously, if you think about it this way, if you just look at your G string in the middle, right? Your next G shape, you've gone 1, 2, 3. You've moved that 3rd string into the 3rd note of the scale. 3, 4, 5, your next shape. So each string, as you fret it, as it goes up, is going from the root note to the 3rd note of the scale, to the 5th note of the scale, to the root note. Does that make sense? So each time you slide up, you're changing the order of your fingers, but you're moving those individual strings up the scale also. And that's how the inversions happen. All right? So let's look at our D shape. So making your D shape between the 2nd and 4th frets. D shape, your next D shape, your next D chord is going to be a bar chord. Your next one is going to be an F shape. And your next one is going to be a D shape again. And maybe you can get up to the bar chord. And back down. And back down. F shape. Bar chord. D shape. All right. So that is the first step is wrapping your fingers around the different shapes and really looking at where your fingers are in relation to one another, not just the shape of the whole thing, but the relationship of your fingers. All right? And we'll look at that more as we go through the cycle. The second step is to notice your different 1, 4, 5 chords up and down the neck as we just did. We took the same shape and moved it up and down the neck. Right? Same shape. Okay? Now what we want to do is look in one area of the banjo, and when we use our 1, 4, and 5 chords, very often the closest 1, 4, 5 chords is going to be one of each shape. This reminds me of the game Set. Does anyone play Set? So sometimes you want all of the same shape, and sometimes you want one of each of the options. All right, so that's what this next, just sort of the next logical way of exploring this idea. All right, so let's start with our G. Actually, do me a favor, shake out your hands, because you're probably making all these chord shapes, and maybe your shoulders are like, you know, stretch your hands a little bit, and especially if you've been at other workshops today. We're planning on doing all day tomorrow. You're going to need to do your stretches and make sure. Just like as I hold these chord shapes, when I was practicing them a lot a few years ago, this is how I developed tendonitis, was just really practicing closed chords a lot and then teaching them. And I was just holding it too much without stretching. So anyway, this is so weird because this is a very totally silent room with all of your beautiful faces in front of me. Okay, so we're going to look at the F shape G chord right here between the 3rd and 5th frets. Now, my closest C chord is right here at the 5th fret. And what I often do is I'll just lay down my ring finger is on the 4th string, and if I just lay down that ring finger, I've got my C chord. And go back to that F-shaped G chord. G, C, G, C. So go back to your G chord. Now in keeping with using one of each shape, here's a trick, all right? Take that F shape, slide it back 1 fret, and if you can, leave your your pinky and your ring finger on the 1st and 4th strings, and switch your 1st and 2nd fingers. Instead of going 2nd string, 3rd string, they're now going 3rd string, 2nd string. And there's your D chord. So when you are doing closed chords and you are moving chords around, one of the tricks to really staying connected is any fingers that can stay on the same strings, leave them there and slide them. All right? So take a moment here, if you can see this, going from your F-shaped G chord, slide it back 1 fret, leave your 2 fingers there, and just switch your first 2 fingers. Practice that for a moment. That just makes a huge difference in changing chords if you can leave your pinky and ring finger on those strings. Now, okay, so we have one of each shape. We have our F shape, our bar chord, and our D shape, all within these same 4 frets. Let's play our song. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. C, you make bar chord happy when skies are gray. Back to that F shape. You'll never bar chord C, how much I love you. Now we're going to slide back to that D shape. Take my D shape back to G. Let's do it one more time. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. If you want to practice just doing a bum diddy drop thumb, a bum diddy drop thumb, a pattern. You can do whatever you want there. Um, does that make sense? Using one of each of those shapes. Okay, before we move on to another area of the neck, I want you to notice two things. First of all, your D shape to your D shape to your F shape G chord. This little motion here. Now, I was talking about theory, and we were saying how from the D to the G, up to the G, is moving up a fourth, right? So D, E, F sharp, G, 4, right? So it stands to reason anytime you are moving from this shape to this shape, you are moving a fourth. You're moving up or down a fourth. All right, so I'm going to leave that right there for a moment because I have one other thing I want to do while we're here in this shape. I want you to take a look at, so first of all, take a look at your F-shaped G chord and look at your, just your first two strings. Right? So you're on the second string, 3rd fret, and the first string, 5th fret. Now, what are the first two strings in your C chord? They're both on the 5th fret, between G and C. And what are the first two strings on your D chord? So just thinking about the first two strings. So the first two strings in your D chord. So I'm using different fingers now because I'm going to sort of simplify the idea, but I want you to see where it comes from. If you make your whole D shape, look at those top two strings. They're 1 fret away from each other. 2nd string, 3rd fret, 1st string, 4th fret, right? And the top two strings on your G chord, 2nd string, 3rd fret, 1st string, 5th fret. So that movement is going from your 5 chord to 1, that resolution that feels so nice. And then, so now I'm using different fingers. I've got my first finger just sort of like planted around that 2nd string, 3rd fret. So now, if I'm just playing the top two strings, and I'm going to play bum diddy drop thumba, bum diddy drop thumba, but you can just bum diddy, and only playing the top two strings. All right, so you're not doing like a whole big strum. You're doing a small strum, either just a bum diddy just on those top two strings, or you're doing a bum diddy drop thumba, whatever you want to do. Okay, so we're going to play the song again, but you're using this minimalist version, all right, of the chord changes. So you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Here comes your C chord. You make me happy when skies are gray. I'm hardly moving anything. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take, here's your D, my sunshine away. You're my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me see when sky's back to G. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. All right? So now, instead of it just being random, put your fingers here, put your fingers there, I'm hoping you can see how we brought those notes out of the original chord shapes. Yeah? And this often, if this is new to you, it takes some time for it to sink in. But literally, I did this before class because I was just curious. If you Google banjo chords, and you will find innumerable images of the chord shapes. And in G tuning, which is really common, the shapes are the shapes. Um, and so, but if you're just starting out with it, I encourage you to just start with these three shapes. And then, like I said, look and see where your fingers are in the relationships to each other. And I even think about it like this: 2 frets away, no frets away, 2 frets away, 1 fret away, like that. And you start to see these shapes in different places. All right. So let's move on to the next place of the next area of our banjo. Now, if you remember, we're going to do our D shape G chord. So it's between the 7th and 9th frets. Right? Now, if you remember what I said just a moment ago about when you move from the D shape to the F shape, like we just did, we moved from D to G, and it's a movement of a fourth. So if this is now our G chord, because we've moved the shape up, if I want my 4 chord, my C chord, and same idea that I want to keep my 2 fingers here down, slide them up a fret, and just switch my first 2 fingers instead of going 2 3 3 2 to 2 3 in terms of the strings. So take a moment and just slide back and forth. I have really high action here, so it's sort of annoying. Harder to slide. And now we're going 1 4 1. Where's our closest 5 chord? Well, we need the 3rd shape. It's right there under your first finger. Your bar chord, D, back to G. Now this area is really common for finding the melody up the neck because it's so compact and easy to use. All right. So this time, instead of using, let's look at the first. Actually, let me review all 3 of those chords again. So we have D shape G. Move it up and switch your first 2 fingers. F shape C. G, bar chord, D, and then back to G. So if I talk in shapes, D shape, F shape, bar chord, D shape. So we're going to use these 3 chords and we're going to play our song again. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take, here's your bar chord, my sunshine away. One more time through that. And again, if I'm moving too fast, this is a workshop, so I'm going through a lot of ideas quickly. The idea is that, again, you grab 1 or 2 things. Yeah, Kathy.
So just a reminder to folks that this is being recorded, and you'll have a link for all of this, so you get to review it over and over again. And a quick reminder that when you get that link and you work with the recording, this is for you only. You all are the people who paid to be in this workshop, so please don't put it on Facebook or make it public. Use it for your own review of this totally fabulous workshop, Evie.
Thank you. All right, let's play through that one more time. We only did it once. So starting with the D-shaped G chord. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when Yeah? Okay. Now, just like we did before, I want you to look at just the top 2 strings. So notice now in the D shape, your top 2 strings in your G chord are 1 fret apart. And then to make your 4 chord, they're 2 frets apart. And to make your 5 chord, they're the bar chord right behind you. So very often when we play in this area, you kind of root your first finger down on that bar chord like you're making a D chord, because then you can take your next 2 fingers and hopefully put them down together on the second and first strings and see how it's going 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. That's your G chord. If I put my pinky down, it gives me 2 of the notes in my C chord. And if I lift all of that up, there's my D chord. So if I root that finger down, and even just playing the top 2 strings, let's play our song just on the top 2 strings. So now I've rearranged my fingers, so I'm not worried so much about the 4th string because I'm not even playing it. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Try it again. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Yeah? And then I'll even go so far as to say, let's look at the top 3 strings. So now, just like we did when we moved from the 5 chord to the 1 chord, when we moved up that 4th in the shape from the D shape to the F shape, if I'm using just 3 fingers, I'm going to keep my ring finger on that first string as I slide up 1 fret, and I'm going to change the order of those first 2 strings. G, C, because I will say when I play up here, I do use these notes a lot. You notice you make your bar chord, and then you can just lay those fingers down there. Does that make sense? So you really start to see not just here's a chord, there's a chord, but the relationships between your fingers and all of the chords. All right. Now we're going to look at this in a few different ways. So let's do this. So you have your open G, your first position C, and you move that up and change your fingers to your D shape. Slide that up, change your first 2 fingers to your G. Let's do that again, and we'll do it with our bum ditty here. C chord, D chord, up to G. Back down, D chord. Change your fingers to C chord and open. Again, C. Change your fingers to your D chord, up to G. From here, G chord, our next C is our bar chord. slide it up to D, and our next G is here. Is that D shape, right? So we're going to go back, back and forth. So now you're up at this D-shaped G chord. Lay down your first finger, bar chord, D, down to C, down to G. So G here in that F shape, up to C bar chord, up to D bar chord. Lay your fingers down, G. Back down, D. Slide it down to C, down to G. Keep going down to D, C, and open. So we're going to take that up again. Here's go. G, C, up to D, up to G, up to C, bar chord, slide that to D, lay your fingers down, G. Now we're going to go up from here. So we have the D-shaped G, up to an F-shaped C, slide it up 1 fret, up 2 frets, and then your bar chord. So bar chord at the 12th fret, slide it back to D, F-shaped D, down to C, down to G. Let's go between these G chords, okay? So we have the D shape, F shape, up 2 frets, F shape, bar chord. Bar chord, down to D, F shape D. So we didn't explore this area yet, but I do want to point out, notice that the F shape D chord ends at the 12th fret. Just to orient you. Always keep the 12th fret in mind. It's a great marker, and usually it's marked with something exciting or 2 dots. Usually. Okay, so starting from the bar chord G, our new nut, G, down to the F shape that ends at that 12th fret. That's our D chord. Slide that down 2 frets. Slide it down 1 fret and change your first 2 fingers. So let's go back and forth between these G shapes. So you have 1, 4 chord, 5 chord, and 1. 5 chord, 4 chord, back to 1. Keep going down. Bar chord D, bar chord C, F shape G, D shape D, D shape C, and open. Take a deep breath, and we're going to work our way up. 1, 2, ready, go. G, first position C, D shape D, F shape G, bar chord C, bar chord D, D shape G. Hang out there for a second. Up to F shape C, F shape D, bar chord G. Now I want you to notice something from here. Remember when we were back here at our bar chord D on the 7th fret and we laid those 2 fingers down to get to our G, D, G, and we talked about again how from the 5 to the 1 is a 4th, right? So if you're up here at your 12th fret, you can lay those 2 fingers down and there's your 4 chord. It also looks just like this 4 chord. Right? Now, one little thing is that if you are anchored here at the 12th fret, you can pretend that you're playing open. You can play, for instance, you are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. I'm just leaving this finger down. Never know, dear, how much I love you. Now right here, I'm going to use like my D7 shape. Yeah, Doesn't sound too good on my instrument here. Sounds terrible. But you get the idea. Just like if you put your finger here at the nut and you use those two, you're just using maybe your middle finger and ring finger instead of your first finger and second finger, something like that. So just to visualize how when you're up here, you can slide that up to D. But you can also pretend that you're in open tuning and just play the way you normally would, but with different fingers. If that makes sense. All right. This is a lot of information if it's new to you. And especially if your fingers are not used to making these shapes, your fingers need a minute to catch up with everything else. But before we close for specific questions and all of that, I want to show you one other thing. And that is the same ideas apply when we go to other tunings. All right. So I don't want you to retune right now because I feel like we don't quite have the time for that. But I'm going to quickly go to C. So in double C tuning, it's the same idea. I have 3 different shapes I'm going to use, and I'm going to move them around in the same way. So Kathy, Brad just said we had 20 minutes. You think it's worth everyone going to double C tuning?
Actually, Evie, I might consider just delving into some minor chords that you might use in your G tuning as well. There was a question about that.
There was a question about it?
Yeah, just like how you've got 1-4-5 pretty clearly spelled out, but
Right.
what about like E minor or A minor? Some of those common ones. I
Okay.
mean, you could go into double C as well, but that might take a while.
Right.
It's up to you.
Well,
Okay, so-
you're in double C, so why don't you do that quick thing as a demo just to show
Yes.
people and then go back to what Brad suggested with the minor chords? That would be great.
Yeah, I actually wanted to not have everyone tune to double C in the first place. I just want to show you I'm in double C. Here's my C major chord, right? So I think of that as bar chord with the first string. So with the same idea, it moves up to my 4 chord, up to my 5 chord, and up to my 1 chord. Okay, so that bar chord with the first string 2 frets away is just like your bar chord in C. The second position, just like we used the flat 7, that we used the F shape, I kind of work off of the same idea here. Now, if you've ever made it's like a D7 shape in if you play guitar, I call it the triangle shape. Boy, someone's really flashing a lot, the camera. Anyway, so I call it this triangle shape because I'm only using 3 of the strings. And that's the other one that's going to move around in the same ways. So they move to they have the same relationships, that from one shape up to the 4 chord is going to be 5 frets. The 4 and the 5 chords are always going to be 2 frets apart. And then the third shape, I'm going quickly through this, but again, you can find this on the internet, or I'm happy to answer questions later. But if you know your 4 chord in double C tuning, it's built off of that. So there are the same 3 shapes, or sorry, they're not the same 3 shapes. There are 3 shapes, and they move around, and then you do the same thing. You get your fingers used to those 3 shapes, and you're like, oh, where's my 1-4-5 chord up here? And the same way that we logically went through it, that you take one shape and you move that up and down the neck, and then you look at one area of the neck and use one of each of the shapes, And then you look at just the top few strings and be like, how can I go between chords there? The other thing that you can do is go to different places on the neck and find your scale. And we don't have enough time to really go into that. But I'm going to go back to G. So the three shapes in double C tuning are this. Sorry, I can't play it. I'm back in G. But in the same way that fretting your first string second fret is C major, it's like having the bar chord with fretting the first string 2 frets away. The other shape is a triangle shape. The whole thing is sort of like a diminished chord on the guitar, where your fourth and second strings are on 1 fret, and your third and first strings are on the next fret. But I usually play that with 3 fingers in an easier way. I know I'm going through this very quickly. And the other one is based on your 4 chord on this third and first strings, and how that moves away, that you have how that moves. Sorry, I'm not being very clear because normally I would go slowly through it. But in the interest of time, I'm back in G. But the idea being that how far you move up and down the neck, or how to find one area that you can play in, how to find the melody somewhere else on the neck. It's great. Okay, I'm back in G. And Brad, thank you for that reminder, because that was something I did want to look at. And one of the reasons why I talked in the beginning about the order of the strings. So, for example, the relative minor in the key of G is what? So the 6th chord, right? So you got your 6th chord, and it's an E minor. Yeah, so we want an E minor. So we've determined that the order of these notes is 1, 3, 5, and that's in our open and in our bar chord. So make your bar chord C, move it up 2 frets to D, move it up 2 frets to E. Now that's an E major chord. In order to make an E minor chord, you want your third note of the scale to be a flat third. So this is actually the triangle shape I was talking about, where you have your first finger on the 2nd string, and then your middle finger and ring finger on the 3rd and 1st strings. So you've lowered that third a half step, and that's an E minor. So you can find any shape in this way. For instance, if you wanted to have a minor 2 chord, how would you do that? So if this is G, this is A, this is A minor, because I've moved the third note of the scale. If it's 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, that's an A minor. Anytime you lower the third to a flat third, that makes it a minor, right? So here would be my A minor, slide that up 2 frets, B minor, and up to a regular bar chord, C. And then Kathy wrote in the chat that that's the, I didn't see the whole thing, but it's the same shape as the flat 7 shape chord that you use in double C tuning, that minor shape. Yeah? So by this token, let's actually look at our other inversions. So if you make your G chord in your F shape, and you want a 2 minor, you're going to take that shape, slide it up 2 frets. So this is a 2 major, and we determined earlier that it's 1, 3, 5, 1. So if you lower that third, 1, 3, 3. I don't ever use all 4 fingers. My apologies. So it's a slightly different shape. but you can find it from there. Yeah? And then if we take our third shape, so I'm making the D shape up between the 7th and 9th frets. I'm going to slide that up 2 frets. There's my A major. And we've determined that the 1st and the 4th strings are the 3rd note of the scale. Where am I? We were here. There we go. So there's your A minor. And I might move my fingers around to get the notes that I want. Because again, in clawhammer banjo, I very rarely use all 4 fingers just as a habit. And then one last little thing before opening up for questions. When you are, something that I love, when you're up in this position, if you remember the D shape G chord up between 7th and 9th frets, and you have your middle finger on the 2nd string at the 8th fret. Put your first finger on the 1st string, 7th fret. Then you can use your ring finger on the 9th fret, 1st string. And then same frets on the 3rd string. So this is just a little fun tip for when you are figuring out melodies and you're not holding whole chords down. If you leave your middle finger on the 2nd string at the 8th fret, you can toggle between your first and third fingers on the frets around them between 7 and 9. And then you have a lot of the scale right there to play with. And I've done that without moving anything, just moving these 2 fingers around and keeping that middle finger just sitting there on that 2nd string, 8th fret. Does that make sense? And that's a great place to hang out to find melodies up the neck. So when I was learning, I mostly learned tunes, and I would learn the melodies as they went up the neck, but I wasn't thinking about the chords that were behind them. So something that's fun to do is, as you explore melodies up the neck, look and be like, oh, that's a 4 chord. So if I put more fingers down, I can get more of the chord if I want to, because you can sort of see the relationships between them. So I feel like there's a lot of information, especially if you're new to it, packed into a short amount of time. And very often I'm just going to say real quick before we have questions, I teach a regular class on Tuesday nights at the Freight and Salvage. Everything's been moved online, Freight and Salvage in Berkeley. So it's been moved online, but it is still on Pacific time. So we've moved it a little bit earlier. So the beginning class is at 6 and the intermediate class is at 7:30. The intermediate class is learning tunes at a slow pace. The beginner class is for rank beginners, which I think you are all not rank beginners. But the next session starts this coming Tuesday. If you want to join, obviously you can join from anywhere. And the links are up on my website. The other thing is I also teach online at Peghead Nation. And the thing that there's a whole bunch of stuff there, including lessons like this on the movable chords. There are tabs for all that stuff. And something I'm proud of on Peghead is that there are play-along tracks that you can play along with me for several times through. So again, hearkening back to what I said at the beginning, that in my group classes, I feel like the hardest thing for you to do as an individual is to be playing in time with other people in that more circular fashion where you just kind of keep going and picking things up as you go in a more like an oral tradition. So it gives a little bit of opportunity to do that. And actually, the code EVL, EVIEL, will get you a free month if you do want to check that out. Now, all of us who are teaching at this festival also teach online, and of course, there are lots of things to choose from. But now it's like the world is your oyster with all these Zoom classes all over the place. Um, I think those were the two things I wanted to tell you about Peghead and then about my upcoming freight and salvage classes. It's EVIEL is the code for a free month, or you can.
There are a couple questions coming in here, Evie. One is there a simple way to find the seventh chord in G up and down the neck?
So the very often when the seventh chord is going to be a flat seven, so instead of being the F sharp that's in the scale of G, it's going to be an F chord. And the simple way is to slide 2 frets back from any G chord. So just like this is F shape, slid up to G, here's G here. You can either slide up from D or down from G. But so the flat 7 is always going to be 2 frets down, just like the 2 chord is 2 frets up. So you just use the same shape, and you can find any chord that you want, knowing this information, the order of the notes.
I love this one question from Helen. This is one of my favorite things about demystifying the neck on the banjo. But can you say a bit more about figuring out what chord a note belongs to if you just have one melody note?
Ooh, what chord a note belongs to? Well,
So,
it's
yeah, so
I'm
like
not
say your finger's on the 10th fret of the first string, how would you know what chord that likely shows up in?
well right now where we're at. If I am on the that's the ninth. Um, boy, I don't know an easy answer for that. I think it's either going to be it's either going to be bar chord, 1 back, or 2 back,
And
right?
it's going to depend on what key you're in.
Of course, it depends on what key you're in, but I mean, I'm just assuming from G, like from G, because if you looked at just the top 2 strings of all of those shapes, they're either the bar chord is at the same fret, the D shape is 1 fret off, and the F shape is 2 frets off. So you can try any of those, and you'll probably find what you're looking for. And then the other thing to say is that the other notes are going to add different colors into the chords that you have. It's just if we're talking about major chords. If that makes sense. Any other questions?
I'd like to remind folks that Evie is playing in the concert. That's tonight. You're playing in the concert tonight.
Yeah, in just a couple hours.
Yeah, in just a couple hours. With Keith will be joining you.
Yeah, my partner Keith Terry. We've done a bunch of live concerts, and we're gonna give it a rest for a while, just because everyone's inundated with live music in the box here in our little squares.
Oh, I can't
But
get enough of it. I'm loving it.
I'm grateful for the opportunity. We actually did 7 Sunday salon concerts with no repeat material, so we just dug deep into our repertoire and into our arrangements of stuff. And oh, sorry, there was one more thing. Some people are popping up saying they like the Peghead classes. Thank you very much. I will be doing a workshop through Peghead Nation sometime this month on Facebook Live, and then they will be sending it out to all of my students who are registered for Peghead. So
And we just did one because Marcy teaches mandolin on Peghead. It'll be on Facebook Live, and it's not just Evie students who can watch. And it was a super fun thing. So just go like Peghead Nation's Facebook page and keep track, and it'll let you know. So I think we're just about out of time. Maybe Brad, you can repost the YouTube link for tonight. And we're going to see how many technical things Brad can do at once. And unmute everybody for a moment of chaotic gratitude to Evie. Here we go.
I also recommend that you, before I do that, just that you all go into gallery view in the upper right, just so you can see everybody.
Yeah, it's super fun.
But I'll unmute you, and you'll get a few seconds to say whatever you'd like to say to Evie. Here you go.
On your mark, get set, go.
Thank you. Really good.
Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
It's hilarious.
And if you see a friend that you know, go ahead and say hi. Hi, Margie.
Hi,
Yeah.
Grace.
Hey, Donna.
Thank you,
Hi,
Evie. This
Donna.
is
It's
great.
nice to see you.
Hey, everybody.
You get to
Hey,
see
Don.
everybody there.
Nice.
Okay, we're going to mute you again.
Guys.
Mr. Omnipotent will mute you again. Hey, Evie, this is what the hell?
Sorry, I muted you too, Kathy.
Yeah, you'll pay for that. Evie, this has been a fantastic workshop, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. And those of you who are watching right now, you know, you can share the post about how your friends can watch tonight. It's unlike these workshops, it's going to be, you know, free to the public on YouTube and on the Mike Seeger Commemorative Old Time Banjo Festival Facebook page. And Marcy will be watching the comments there. We're going to be performing, but you want to talk to each other or comment constantly, that's up to you. We're going to have some skill testing questions tonight with with some prizes, some stupid, this looks like Hollywood Squares. We're just going to be having like the banjo quiz show and a whole lot of fun. And this is really fabulous. So thanks so much, Evie, and thank you everyone for doing this. And Brad has primarily mastered the technology behind pulling all of this off, which has so far, you know, so far so good.
Yeah, this has been great fun, and I appreciate you all giving this a shot. And there are still spaces available in the workshops for tomorrow, so if you want to get those in, you can sign up before 11 a.m. 3 tremendous workshops with Lucas Poole, Frank Evans, and Allison DeGroot, all of some of my favorite players, and definitely consider that if you're around tomorrow.
Yeah, so everybody give yourself a break from screen time. I'm going to go outside and walk up a mountain for half an hour, and we look forward to seeing y'all tonight. Bring some friends.
I'll
some
unmute
virtual
everybody
friends and
once
have a
more.
cocktail party.
Thank
So
you,
you can all
Brad
say thank
and
you once
Kathy.
more.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the
Great.
chat.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Everybody's
This
going to
was
leave,
great.
but
Thanks,
Evie,
Brad.
for a minute.
Bye.